Good evening, good afternoon, good morning. Welcome. Tonight, we'd like to discuss the recent announcement by ZEC that the Zimbabwe 2023 elections are going ahead, even though they acknowledge that there is no verified voters roll. Just listen to this.
Once the president has proclaimed the election date, there is nothing short of an earthquake which can stop the election. So whether candidates scrutinize the voters' roll, whether they see any anomalies in it, whatever the anomalies are, whatever legal recourse that they have, will not stop the election. I want that to be very clear, and that's nothing stops an election. If there are any anomalies in that voters' roll, what is at candidates can avail themselves to any anomalies to possibly challenge the outcome of the election. But whatever legal recourse is at hand cannot stop the election. And I think the Chief Justice was quite clear in his interpretation of the law. Nothing stops an election after the proclamation of the election date. What candidates can do for whatever reason and whatever their opinions and views are is actually use anything that they come up with to challenge the outcome of the election.
So there we have it. Nothing is going to stop the elections. And she's quite adamant that, and it's almost clear that the president is going to proclaim the date and the elections will go ahead. Although she acknowledges that the voters' roll, and it has been on the national agenda ever since the 2018 elections. It was one of the issues that has been on the national agenda, that we need to produce a verified voters' roll. It is a legal requirement. And yet, here we are. With the elections round the corner, we still do not have a verified voters' roll. This is absolutely disappointing. There are many people who had the opportunity since the 2018 elections to get this specific item sorted out, to make sure we have a verified voters' roll. They didn't lift a finger. Let's start with ZEC itself. The Zimbabwe Election Commission have the legal duty to produce a verified voters' roll. 43 years after independence, ZEC has failed to produce a verified voters' roll. This is a historic fact. Again and again, elections have been elected and they have gone ahead, and there was no verified voters' roll. None. Team Pachedu was one of the NGOs that have flagged this issue since 2018 of the number of errors in the voters' roll, the copies that they could get. And of course, the copies that they were able to get, and they flagged out the errors, ZEC always rejected them and disowned that voters' roll. This is a problem. ZEC itself should have been reformed so that it becomes independent. The reason why ZEC has failed to produce a verified voters' roll is that ZEC has become a department in SANU-PF. It is not in SANU-PF's interest to produce a verified voters roll because it is an integral part of the regime vote rigging machinery. Next comes Parliament itself. Parliament has known all along that the failure to produce a verified voters roll has been a bone of contention. So Parliament, if they wanted to, they would have demanded that ZEC must produce a verified voters roll. And when ZEC submitted their delimitation report, on which is the first thing towards holding the next elections, Parliament should have said, where is the verified voters roll? They didn't. And we all know why. Parliament, since the last election, 2018, has got a clear ZANU-PF majority. And needless to say, ZANU-PF, it is in the interest of ZANU-PF that there's no verified voters roll, because it's part and parcel of the regime's vote rigging. So the last parliament, without a verified voters roll, produced the result that ZANU-PF wanted. A parliament with a clear two-thirds majority, ZANU-PF. So ZANU-PF can do as it pleases. And lo and behold, that parliament is turning a blind eye to a fundamental requirement for free, fair, and credible election. What is worth noting at this point is that there are opposition members of parliament, MPs in parliament. They did not raise that issue. Why? Because the opposition in Zimbabwe is really part and parcel of ZANU-PF. They may pretend that they're in opposition, but the truth is they're not. The opposition has always acted within certain boundaries. They make big song and dance about reforms. The reforms that we're talking about here that would have made ZEC independent. But when they had the golden opportunity to implement those democratic reforms, they chickened out. During the 2008 to 2013 GNU, the MDC opposition had the golden opportunity to implement the democratic reforms, which would have taken away ZANU-PF carte blanche powers to rig elections. It's control of ZEC, the judiciary, the police, the army, you name it. They failed to implement even one reform. Not even one. So we have got an opposition here which knows the yellow lines, the double yellow lines drawn by ZANU-PF, which they must not cross. And they have never crossed them. In Parliament, they did not even raise the issue of there is no verified voters roll. We know that come the elections, they will participate without a verified voters roll. How do we know that? Because they've done it in the past. People have reminded them that there is no verified voters roll. They ignored that and still participate. We have an opposition here which is no different from ZEC in the sense that they are controlled by SANU-PF. They are but an extension of SANU-PF. That is the reality. That is the only rational explanation why the opposition did not implement even one meaningful reform. And yet, now they keep on participating in these flawed elections, illegal elections, to give ZANU-PF legitimacy in return for a few seats on the gravy train. The state president, of course, could have stopped this charade when he got the ZEC's delimitation report. He would have turned around and say, on what is this delimitation report based? Did you produce the verified voters roll? But of course, he knows that ZEC does not produce a verified voters roll, and he knows why. And he knows better not to ask. In fact, it is in his interest that there's no voters roll, as we've already said. It is interesting that ZEC was coming up with if the opposition or anyone is not happy with the elections going ahead without a verified voters roll, they've got a recourse of keeping a track of what the anomalies are in the voters roll and using that to challenge the outcome. This is just a vicious cycle. To start with, if there's no verified voters roll, we are going into these elections without a verified voters roll. Where are those people going to get those anomalies? How are they going to get those anomalies? ZEC will see to it that the opposition does not get the voters roll. They and ZANU-PF alone will control the voters roll. Anything else that the opposition or any of those candidates would challenge the results, get hold of, ZEC can always disown it, that they don't know that voters roll. That is the whole point. You go into the elections without a verified voters roll. I think the immediate question would be, why did you go into the election without a verified voters roll? And when you knew also that it was a legal requirement. So if all the key players in this election have pretended not to know that there's no verified voters roll, I think it's fait accompli. We are going into these elections, and ZANU-PF knows it, and know that they cannot be challenged on that. And even if one was to challenge it, you are taking it to whose court, as Mugabe would have said. The Constitutional Court last time we saw the charade that took place when Chamisa challenged the results of 2018. It is unbelievable that the Constitutional Court itself, for instance, accepted that 16 of the so-called V11 results, 16, 1-6, had two or more results that were identical in every respect. And yet the Constitutional Court accepted the ZEC lawyer's explanation that it is not for ZEC to ask or to question why the figures are identical. I think the more rational explanation is those 16 were duplicate because in all the 16 there was one thing in common. Mnangagwa had a commanding lead in all those 16. So you can see that they were having a situation here where to top up Mnangagwa, some of the V11 forms were entered once and then entered again. And then you look for another one where Mnangagwa has got a commanding lead. And those results are added again for the second time, sometimes the third time. And yet the learned judges were not interested, pretended that is not for them to inquire. Surely this court challenge was not about two individuals, Mnangagwa and Chamisa, who won the election. This was over a bigger issue. Were these elections free, fair, and credible? This is at the very heart of Zimbabwe elections, of democratic rule in Zimbabwe, rule of law in Zimbabwe, a stable, just, and progressive nation. That is why free, fair, and credible are so important. And yet, the Constitutional Court were blind to that. They took it as a personal case between two, Chamisa and Mnangagwa. They had the power to have said, okay, of those 16 V11 where all the details are identical in every respect. Let's open the sealed ballot boxes of those 16. I think we would have found that maybe there were 8 sealed ballot boxes. The other 8 did not exist because it was the same V11 that was re-entered twice, a duplicate. And yet our learned friends, the judges, did not want to know that. So in this case here, ZEC is telling us that we can go back to the Constitutional Court. To what? What would we expect from that Constitutional Court that we don't know already? Absolute waste of time. I think the only meaningful recourse here is to admit that these elections, ZANU-PF is rigging these elections. There is no denying that. And it is absolutely meaningless to keep pretending that we are having free, fair, and credible elections when we are not. The refusal to produce a verified voters roll is just one of the many problems we have with this election. The European Union produced a detailed report of the 2018 elections, and they came up with 23 recommendations of what Zimbabwe should do to make sure that the next elections are free, fair, and credible. Not even one of those recommendations have been have seen have been implemented. Not even one. And yet we are going into 2023 elections. It's going to be a repeat of the same thing. We are not going to have free and fair, incredible elections here. How could we? We don't have a verified voters roll. ZANU PF has managed to uh, deny 3 million Zimbabweans in the diaspora the vote under the pretext that the regime is under sanctions from the Western countries. What that has got to do with the people in the diaspora, biggest belief. You do not beat your wife and children just because you had a quarrel with your neighbor. What has got the wife and the children to do with your quarrel? The argument that they cannot allow the people in the diaspora to have a vote because ZANU-PF officials are not allowed to travel. Even if we accept that, that is valid for those countries in the West that have imposed the sanctions. What about countries in SADC, South Africa, Botswana, and so forth, where the majority, in fact, of the people of Zimbabweans in the diaspora are? Why are you denying them the vote? ZANU-PF officials, as much as MDC officials and Triple C officials, are free to travel to South Africa and Botswana and so forth. But no. Of course, the main reason why they deny the vote is clear to see. Most of those people, the majority of the people in the diaspora, are there as economic refugees or political refugees or both. And of course, they blame ZANU-PF for their plight. They're not going to vote for ZANU-PF. The second reason is, if they were allowed to vote, while ZANU-PF can intimidate and rig elections in Zimbabwe, it will be very difficult to do the same in the diaspora. And so the best thing is to deny everybody in the diaspora the vote. And let's face it, 3 million by ZANU-PF's own accounting, Zimbabweans in the diaspora, they constitute a significant number. Let's not forget that Mnangagwa, by SEC's own calculation, won the 2018 election with 2.4 million votes. 2.4 million votes. So if 3 million of Zimbabweans are in the diaspora, I think anyone can see the election figures would be totally different. The election results would be totally different. We are going into 2023 elections knowing ZANU-PF is rigging these elections. That is a fact. We are also going into this 2023 elections knowing fully well that the opposition will participate no matter what, because they know ZANU-PF is giving a few seats, a few gravy train seats to entice the opposition to participate. And that is all they care about. They know that by participating, they are giving ZANU-PF legitimacy. But they don't care about that one, as long as they get their share of the reward, of the spoils of power. It is tragic. But that is where we are. I think the solution is for Zimbabweans themselves to say no to these flawed elections. to expose that these are flawed elections. Never get tired of mentioning it, that this is ZANU-PF is rigging these elections. This is a flawed process. And I think Zimbabweans should also take on the opposition head on and remind them that they are selling out. They are participating in a process only to give ZANU-PF legitimacy for the sake of a few gravy train seats. If we expose that the process is flawed and show that the opposition has no political credibility, I think we put organizations like SADC in particular under enormous pressure not to rubber stamp these elections and give ZANU-PF legitimacy. If we deny ZANU-PF legitimacy, we will be back to the situation we were in 2008 when ZANU-PF was forced to go into a GNU. I know many Zimbabweans, the minute you mention GNU, they don't want to know. But the truth of the matter is, 2008 to 2013 GNU, there was nothing wrong with it if the opposition MDC had implemented the democratic reforms. This second GNU, all we've got to make sure of is that we implement those reforms. They are not rocket science. Anyone competent can implement them. This will get us out of this political mess. At the present moment, we're just going round and round in circles, one rigged election after another. Of course, the opposition, Nelson Chamisa, the morning after the election, will come up with the usual statement that ZANU-PF had stolen the elections. And yet, now they are the ones who are telling us that Triple C is going to win big in 2023. We warned them about the rigging, about the violence and so forth. They completely ignore that. They still maintain that Triple C is going to win big in 2023. We have got to end this madness. ZANU-PF is rigging 2023 elections. ZEC is helping them rig those elections. Triple C are playing their part by pretending they're going to win to give the process credibility. And we, the ordinary people, are the ones who have got to pay the price for it. The nation will be stuck with another corrupt, incompetent, tyrannical ZANU-PF for another 5 years. We have got to stop this madness, and we can stop it. Food for thought. Thank you very much and good night.